Now let's travel to 1935 when the Japanese imperialist fascists were aggressively expanding their political and military influence. They had their sights on China, a country with a population of 500 million, abundant agricultural land, and most importantly, very poor people. And as the Chinese were fighting civil wars post-Reformation, having more weapons and being more military equipped, the Japanese swore to wipe out China within 3 months. First, they blocked all of the main ports along the coast of China. The blockade at multiple ports in China disconnect the country from external aid, and it's easy now to conquer the most populous country in the world. However, the Sino-Japanese War unexpectedly persists for a long 8 years, leading to our stories today, the Nanyang volunteer drivers and mechanics. As the country was internally vulnerable fighting between Kuomintang and共产党, how could China win over the Japanese, who are the unsung heroes behind the success? Let us reveal to you this untold story today. Hello, welcome back to Fearless Passport. My name is Evan, and it's been a while that I didn't upload any new video. I was really busy with some other work, and today I'm back with an untold story, a very special story about Nanyang volunteer mechanics and drivers. This story are not in our usual history book, and most of the people have not heard of this story before. And I think it's a good idea to bring it out. There was this significant history and how our ancestors had contributed to the success of Sino-Japanese War. And without further ado, let us jump into the story today. After the fall of Qing dynasty, China had always been too poor and backward to produce war arms domestically. Most of the weapons, ammunition, and guns were purchased overseas and transported to China via sea freight. When Japan imposed a blockade at multiple ports in the coast of China, all of the supplies had to be transited to Hong Kong and Vietnam before being transported to the mainland. And it was only a matter of time before these two international seaports were occupied. Once the remaining ports were bombed, China would be completely isolated from the rest of the world. At this challenging time, the only way to connect China to the outside world was to build a railway and highway from Kunming through the western Yunnan to northern Myanmar. International aid, the medical supplies, food and weapons could arrive in Lasio, a tiny city in northern Myanmar, crossing the border through this windy highway into China. As the supplies arrive in Kunming, items can be distributed to different war zones in the mainland. It all seems like a perfect plan, isn't it? But little did we know this highway was exceedingly difficult to build. The road was windy and narrow and was constructed primarily by the older women and children, as the young and strong men were out fighting the war. Many Burmese and Chinese died from building this highway because the highway stretched across 24 bends with an inclination, a slope close to 30 degrees. This road is extremely dangerous. Only trained drivers have the experience with trucks could handle the bends. And in case of any mistake, the cars and drivers will crash over the cliffs. And this is how this 1,146.1 kilometers windy road is also known as the anti-Japanese highway. It was built during the warring period and most importantly provided survival hopes to those fighting in the Sino-Japanese War. But there was another big problem. Who would be the one to drive on this windy, treacherous road? And don't forget, back then China was really poor, so there wasn't a lot of people who can drive and handle heavy machineries. So the Nanyang Chinese Association recruit transport mechanics from Nanyang to help the motherland voluntarily. The calling had gathered more than 3,000 patriotic youth all over the Southern Sea, namely Malaya, Indonesia, Philippines, Laos, and Thailand, to participate in this course. They were known as the Nanyang Voluntary Mechanics and Drivers, the heroes who are skilled in driving mechanics with the mission to transport war supplies and carry out emergency repairs of vehicles along the windy Yunnan and Myanmar highway. In 1939, approximately 3,200 Nanyang volunteers departed to Myanmar to transport international aid medical supplies and war materials for China. The supplies arrived by sea at Rangoon in Burma and were then taken by railway to Lasio. From there, the supplies were transported via trucks for 7 days through this treacherous Yunnan-Burma highway to Kunming. The volunteers would then take over from Kunming and transport the supplies to the rest of the war zones. Along this mountainous road, drivers faced extreme challenges including rain, slippery roads, falling trees, and malaria. And the living conditions were really insufficient. Drugs and medicines were prioritized for the frontliners, so resulting many volunteers being too sick to transport the arms and guns across the borders. Living conditions were really limited at that time. The workforce was never enough to keep up with the overloading of weapons, and the volunteers had to drive at the same time repair under the malnourished conditions. Any carelessness during the transportations could lead to immediate death for the drivers and damage to the supplies on the truck as well. And this condition persists until 1940s when the Japanese discovered these secret missions. They were wondering where the Chinese were getting their weapons to fight, as all of their seaports had been occupied. And when they finally found out about this continuous transport in Kunming, without questions, they immediately put the volunteers under the indiscriminate airstrike, bombing all over the borders to stop the transportations. So majority of the volunteers lost their lives here, and anyone who were caught alive were executed with a gunshot or even buried alive in public. From 1939 to 1941, a combined capacity of 452,000 tons of supplies was successfully transported on the Yunnan-Burma highway, while all the international aid at this time was about 500,000 tons. So that means Nanyang volunteers drivers brought in more than 90% of the war supplies to help fight the Japanese. Finally, in 1945, when the United States bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the 8 years Sino-Japanese War finally ended. More than half of the Nanyang volunteers died heroically. To commemorate the sacrifice of our unsung ancestors, in 2018, UNESCO's Memories of the World Register Asia and Pacific region endorsed the contributions of this particular group of heroes during World War II. Monuments have been erected in memory of our unsung heroes, the Nanyang volunteer mechanics and drivers. These Nanyang volunteers were not heroes fighting on the front line or war strategies, but still, without their contributions, China would not have won the Sino-Japanese War. They remain low profile for the rest of their life, and before they are forgotten, I hope this video reminds every Nanyang Chinese of this untold story. And thank you so much for watching to the end. It's not easy to gather so much information to create this video. However, I hope that my effort helps to keep all these valuable memories alive. And I believe it's essential to honor and remember our ancestors' sacrifice so our future generations can learn from their courage and dedications to a cause larger than themselves. I hope you learned something from this video. If you like the content, please help to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video within your group of friends. And thank you. See you in the next video.